What's going on, ladies and gents, boys and girls, guardians of all ages, Joker back again once again, and today we are talking about the Destiny Vidoc Light in the Darkness. I liked it. Roll the credits. Okay. Old cringe gag is cringe. I know. Speaking of my Patreon, I never plug this, so this video is sponsored by my Patreon. We have one, and if you would like to support the channel, the link is in the description below. My goal is to get to a point where Patreon sustains the channel, and not YouTube, so I don't have to worry about being lost to the algorithm. So I can do more long-form content that may take a week or two to produce. And I'm not always rushing to get something out, with the most clickbait title I can think of, which I know really pisses some people off. But that's the YouTube game. That's how you have to play it, and it's unfortunate. So if you would like to see more long form, more lore, more Final Fantasy, more anything, one, let me know down in the comments below. That'd just be cool. But two, you can support me on Patreon and help us get to that goal. Alright, so the Vidoc is out. I've watched it. What are my thoughts? Let's dive in.
Witch Queen campaign, I think, is probably the most ambitious campaign we've made in a very long time.
We're building the Definitively Destiny campaign, so leaning into the journey you can find in exotic missions or the mechanics you might find in a dungeon.
There are a lot of bombshells in the Witch Queen narrative. Season of the Risen is chapter 1 and the beginning of the end for the Light and Darkness saga.
Traditionally speaking, the Destiny story mode is not one of Bungie's strongest offerings. I don't even think that's controversial. The opening mission is normally a blast, with really only the exceptions of Shadowkeep and Beyond Light, which I would rank as two of the lesser opening missions in all of Destiny, outside of seasonal content. And once the first mission is completed, the game's story kind of devolves into missions spread out over arbitrary grind. Unless you're Shadowkeep, and then the entire story is just one big arbitrary grind. But even Forsaken, my favorite Destiny 2 expansion, went from a really strong opening, let's spend the next hour grinding out bounties for Spider! Yay! Everybody loves that. I've never enjoyed how the injection of busywork to pad out a DLC's runtime really puts a brake on the momentum of the storytelling. And with Witch Queen, it looks like that may be a thing of the past. And while I'm sure there'll be some grinding, especially if you're trying to do it all on Legendary, the way that Bungie's talking about the Witch Queen campaign makes it come off like the story modes are going to incorporate more aspects of Destiny's best content. Exotic missions, dungeons, and raids. Also, it'd be disingenuous of me not to point out that over the last year, while the story modes still have their hiccups, like us just kind of standing there, observing, the storytelling in Destiny has gotten much better than it usually is. Even if I'm not necessarily a fan of the story being told. And yes, there's a difference. You can appreciate the storytelling art and not like the story being told. Will wonders ever cease? This past year, and with content like the exotic quests and the various dungeons and raids, shows that Bungie understands level design on a very fundamental level. It's never been a case of, does Bungie have the talent to deliver on compelling and interesting experiences? The issue has always been delivering those sort of experiences in a way that translates to the player in the campaign. This is why I've always advocated for less DLC throughout the year, because if it means we get better DLC when we do get DLC, that means we have a better game, and probably less stressed out and overworked developers. One of the other benefits of bringing exotic quest, dungeon, and raid experiences into the campaign means that players will be more prepared for the endgame than they traditionally are. I know people roll their eyes when I talk about Final Fantasy XIV, but between duties and dungeons that are part of the story, I would argue that players in Final Fantasy XIV have a really good understanding of what's expected of them in the endgame than Destiny players do. And that's largely because, unlike, say, Final Fantasy XIV, Destiny's story mode, traditionally in the past, hasn't really prepared you for the endgame content. And if I was to be somewhat critical, I think that's largely because Bungie has always designed story modes in a sort of disposable way. Why would you put all the resources into putting dungeon and raid-like mechanics in story missions that people are only going to play 1, maybe 3 times? And if a player wanted to play it more than that, it's kind of a hassle. With Witch Queen, Bungie's thankfully going back to a Destiny 1 style mission layout, at least it seems. Missions do look to be on the map again, or at least selectable from a directory. And you can go in and choose your difficulty, and higher difficulties give you better rewards, which incentivizes the players to replay the missions, which will likely tie into quests and bounties, and Bungie is definitely going to get their mileage out of these missions. And that's not necessarily a bad thing if they're enjoyable to play missions. I think Destiny, and any game really, is at its best when you go, ooh, I want to do that again, not, oh, I have to do that again. Especially when you play multiple characters. And while this may come as a shock to people who don't actually listen to or read my arguments, or warp them into something that they're not because they believe that I hate Destiny, I would rather have a handful of carefully crafted, expertly cultivated experiences for $40 than a bloated grind fest. Like, you know, Shadowkeep and Beyond Light were. And don't get me wrong, while I still think anybody telling you shouldn't be cautious about a game that was announced to have a 6-month delay after changing its leads is delusional and has lost the plot, you absolutely should be cautious about that. Look at gaming history. I'm more than willing to see what these new leads bring to the table. New leads, new creative vision, 6 months more than any other expansion to be worked on, a definitive uptick in the quality of the Season Pass content, and highlights like exotic quests and the 30th anniversary dungeon show that there is talent, there is vision, all there needs to be is execution. So yeah, all in all, story-wise, campaign-wise, everything looks good. While I am still cautious because, come on guys, how many times has Bungie stated they've changed, they understand that they need to do better, that they're going to do better, that this is the definitive Destiny experience, that this is the start of a new chapter.
Witch Queen and Season of the Risen is chapter 1 and the beginning of the end for the Light and Darkness saga.
I really would like Witch Queen to be good. Oh, hey, and Worm Gods. Yeah, note on that. I have a feeling we're about to learn a lot of the story that we thought was true isn't. This is not a bad thing. Again, it's all about execution. In fact, I would go as far as to say that Witch Queen could act as sort of a soft reboot for how we see the cosmic horror side of Destiny 2. And again, that would be a good thing. Let's be honest, Destiny 1 and Destiny 2 lore is kind of muddy, filled with retcons and people just writing things, their words, not mine, people just changing things last second, people holding to a vision of Destiny no one knows. So I think it's time to do a sort of reset. Now we have a chance to take and king this. It's not a fresh start and it shouldn't be. But Bungie now has the opportunity to show players the definitive truth of the Destiny history, show us what really happened, and make that the foundation of the franchise going forward, even if it has to retcon a lot of things. But moving forward. So we learned a little more about glaives and weapon crafting. I don't have much more to say about weapon crafting than what I've already said in my original video that'll be linked somewhere. We do now have an idea of the type of materials that will be required to create these new weapons. And it looks like these materials will have rarities all the way from common to exotic. Enhanced perks sound like a great idea, but I'm not sure how enhanced the enhanced perks really are. Because if they're too good, then they break the game, then PvP players bitch and moan, and I have to make a video about it, and then I get accused of bitching and moaning, and then Bungie nerfs them, and then everybody's just miserable. Everybody hates everybody, everybody's after everybody's throats, nobody likes the fact that their new toys got nerfed. So it would probably be best if these actually didn't work in PvP, just as a non-starter. As far as the glaives go, of course the inner dragoon in me is squealing. The legendary ones sound pretty cool in PvE, and given that it's a slow-firing projectile, melee weapon, I doubt it's going to be all that great in PvP, depending on the fire and movement rate of the projectile and its ammo economy. But I want to be wrong because they look fun. That's not to say that I don't think that people are going to like meme on others with it. I sure as shit am going to, even if it lowers my KD further than it already is, try and get good with it. That said, I do like how it is also a first-person weapon, unlike swords. My assumption is Bungie just really didn't want to deal with third-person peeking, and who can blame them? Which brings us to the exotic glaives. While I certainly think that some classes are getting the shaft and some are getting the best exotic perk on a glaive in the game, probably even the best exotic perk on a weapon in the game. I mean, let's be real, let's be honest, let's be real honest. Shooting Wards of Dawn across the map, even if they're not fully fledged Wards of Dawn, is fucking awesome and kind of OP. I am super fascinated with how the glaive super abilities work, because if it works on ammo and I can just shoot bubbles across the map willy-nilly, again, OP. But if I have to charge it up by getting kills, then less OP. and not really that big of a deal in PvP, which is all I really care about. But moving forward to our last topic, Void 3.0. Not much to say on this one, I'm sorry. I know a Warlock who's not too happy about more Rift centralization between abilities and exotics, if that means anything to anyone. But really, we won't have a grasp on how these abilities affect the game until they're in our hands, so I'm not even going to bother speculating on it. And yeah, that's going to be it for this video. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Remember to like, but only if you did. Subscribe for more. Feel free to donate to my Patreon if you're feeling particularly generous. It really does help the channel out. But above all else, stay frosty.